Welcome to the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast, hosted by William Wolfe. Our mission is to cultivate courageous and biblical Baptist leadership for the 21st century. We aim to revitalize the Southern Baptist Convention from within, defend it from those who seek its destruction, and serve as a better Baptist voice in the public square.
And we're live, folks. Thank you for joining me here this Friday evening. You know, I am all thumbs with tech stuff. One of these days here, Lord willing in the future, we'll have a better studio set up for this stuff we do with the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast. Maybe I'll be better at figuring out. We use Riverside. I feel like every time I log into Riverside, they've changed how things are working. And it takes me about 15 minutes each time to figure out the one minor change. I may be a millennial in age, but I really kind of am a boomer at heart when it comes to tech stuff. I know how to work Microsoft Word, but anyway, we're here, we're live. Thank you for joining me. And look, I know this probably isn't the best time. This probably isn't the best time to get viewers, but you know what? I want to start doing this for our audience at Center for Baptist Leadership, for the Southern Baptist pastors, lay members who listen to us, for the Christians across the country who pay attention to what we're doing, whether you're in the Southern Baptist Convention or not. And really just for everybody who wants to tune into the work that we're doing. I want to begin doing sort of weekly roundups or weekly recaps, or maybe we'll come up with a better term for it. So you know what? Something done is better than something perfect undone. So here we go. This will be done. It won't be perfect, but better than being undone. So I hope that you're having a good Friday. You're on your way home. And we're going to cover some really interesting topics. It'll just be me walking through some items that I think are of particular interest and note to Southern Baptists, to conservatives, to conservative Christians. So we'll walk through a few items, a couple articles. We'll look at some of Trump's statements this week, some excellent statements that he made in defense of the creation order reality of the binary nature of biological sex, male and female. And we'll have a little fun at the end looking at the latest White House meme on deportation and thinking about it from a Christian and a biblical perspective. A lot of people upset about it. Doesn't really bother me. Maybe it bothers you, but we can talk about it and I can share some verses I think would shine some light on it. So let me get my coffee here. And we'll jump in right away to Rhett Burns's recent article on the need for increased financial transparency at the Southern Baptist Convention from our entities. We'll do Rhett's article, Megan's article, an article from Walker, and we'll go from there. So tune in, stay put. So Rhett Burns is a South Carolina pastor. He is one of the most humble and godly servants that I've met in my time working in and around the Southern Baptist Convention. Husband, father, he has a beautiful church. I had a chance to go down there and talk at his church prior to the election on Christian and politics last year. And for 2 years now, Rhett Burns has been leading a charge to try to secure increased financial transparency from our Southern Baptist entities to our Southern Baptist churches. And just as a sort of topper to this conversation, we need to remember that the Southern Baptist Convention exists to serve the churches. The churches do not exist to serve the Southern Baptist Convention. Without the churches, the 40,000 plus 45,000 churches across America that have freely associated with the Southern Baptist Convention, it would not exist. Without the money that they take up every week and the offerings that they take up at regular times throughout the year, Annie Armstrong, Lottie Moon, other things that they do, and sending that money on to the cooperative program, to the state conventions, and to the entities, the Southern Baptist Convention would not exist. It is powered by this concept called the cooperative program, in which churches give money into this bucket, and then it gets allocated out of the bucket to our different entities according to certain formulas. The IMB gets the largest allotment. North American Mission Board gets a big allotment. The 6 seminaries get their own allotments based on their sizes. The ERLC gets an allotment. Lifeway, I believe, still gets somewhat of an allotment. And so we put this money into this bucket. It gets allotted by this formula. It also goes through state conventions, et cetera. And we should be able to know how that money is being stewarded. This is not a question of morbid curiosity about what our entity leaders are making. This is fundamentally a question of good governance and stewardship of the Southern Baptist Convention. And really the need for this comes down to the fact that the trustee system in the Southern Baptist Convention is largely broken. Let me explain what I mean by that. The basic purpose of a trustee board is to ensure that the chief executive officer of the organization that they oversee, whether that's a nonprofit or a for-profit business, is executing on the mission that he is supposed to be tasked with. The trustees are supposed to be turned inward, laser-like focused, evaluating the chief executive officer and the whole institution in terms of how it's fulfilling its mission. They're not there to be sort of PR strategists for the organization. They're not there to just be cheerleaders for the organization. They're holding it in trust. For a for-profit institution that's publicly traded, they're holding it in trust on behalf of the shareholders who have invested in the company. For a nonprofit institution, they're holding it in trust as a board on behalf of the donors who are powering this organization, and behalf of the name of the organization and its mission. And over the last few decades in the Southern Baptist Convention, that system has failed. The trustees don't often even know what's happening at these entities. And we can look at a lot of different examples where you see deficit spending increasing year over year at certain entities, even while executive compensation is also increasing. So just pick a seminary, and I won't name a seminary here, but just for sake of sort of the hypothetical, if you have a Southern Baptist Convention seminary where enrollment is declining, where deficit spending is increasing, and at the same time, the board is continuing to award increases for the executive compensation of the CEO, what sort of signal does that send? How is that CEO, how is that president being held accountable? The fundamental answer is he's not. So all across our Southern Baptist Convention entities, this is what's going on. And so Rhett Burns is arguing that getting increased financial transparency, some very basic benchmarks of metrics, of executive compensation, of conflicts of interest, of major outside donations from organizations, outside organizations, not big donors. It's understandable that big donors would want to be able to maintain their anonymity, and that can be maintained. That these would be revealed, that deficits and revenue and things like that would be shared with the Southern Baptist Convention churches. As it stands today in our business and financial plan, there's language that says churches of the Southern Baptist Convention can ask for these things and they need to be provided. Well, Rhett went and tried to do that, and he got stymied by about half of the entities that he reached out to, and he was working with other pastors as they were doing it too. Some of them just frankly didn't respond. They just flaunted Article 14 of the business and financial plan of the Southern Baptist Convention and refused to provide the information. For the ones that did respond, they didn't actually give the information that they should be giving according to the business and financial plan, salary structures. And he only asked for the salary structures. He was doing just one piece of information fact finding. Some of them sent him information and then said, well, these don't match what's actually happening here. Well, how does that help? That's not transparency. And so as Rhett went through this process, as he's making the case for what he's calling a 990 amendment to the business and financial plan that would require Southern Baptist Convention entities to disclose similar information that is disclosed on the Form 990 that nonprofits file with the federal government to Southern Baptist Convention entities. He found that we're not even doing what we should be doing, the minimum of what we say we should be doing. So we need to have this motion. We need to have this debate. And the executive committee has, quite frankly, just squashed it now for over 2 years. Their subcommittee on stewardship and convention finances has refused to bring it forward to the messengers for a vote. And after 2 years of stonewalling Rhett and functionally acting like essentially a presbytery board over the Southern Baptist Convention, sort of taking away from us as Southern Baptists the right to essentially congregational or denominational debate on the future and direction of things. They said, we'll come up with our own plan and we'll report it back to the convention. And so they did that. At the latest executive committee meeting, they proposed a rewrite of the Southern Baptist Convention business and financial plan. It shortens it. That's fine. It streamlines it. That's fine. But it does a lot more than that. So let's take a look at his article here and dive into this for a second. This came out today at the Center for Baptist Leadership. So I'm going to share my screen and we can take a look at this article here together for a little bit. So here's Rhett's article at centerforbaptistleadership.org. The Emperor Has No Clothes: How the Executive Committee's Enhanced Transparency Plan Codifies Increased Obscurity. And the headline there, as I was just articulating to you, is that for years, the executive committee has blocked real reforms to bring increased financial transparency. Now they want to codify secrecy and call it progress. When I was working with Rhett on this article, and again, Rhett is a wonderful gentleman, Southern Baptist pastor, he was asking me if we could essentially title it with a riff off this old Judge Judy saying, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. I was like, okay, Rhett, we can't use that title, right? But we can use that. We can use something like that. But that's what the executive committee is trying to do here. They're essentially trying to pee on the legs of Southern Baptists and then tell us it's raining when it comes to efforts to get increased transparency in the Southern Baptist Convention. Rhett starts out talking about how giving is down, and it is. They reported that the cooperative program giving is 5% below budget. And from what I understand in terms of when the most giving comes into the cooperative program, it was the recent quarter. So like the biggest giving quarter of the year for the cooperative program is 5% down. So that's not just 5% on the year. When you factor that out, it's going to have a bigger impact. Designated giving is down 7% from this time last year. And Rhett keeps beating this drum. The reasons for this decline is one simple fact: churches will not fund what they don't trust. Rhett rearticulates that his motion is just a simple step to bring our transparency up to today's best practices. And as it stands today, Planned Parenthood is actually more transparent than the SBC with its donors. And that just is something that should not be. It's crazy, but it's true. And as Rhett has argued before, the motion that he's made was germane. It was appropriately made. It was in order, and it fundamentally deserves debate. And that is not what the executive committee and the platform has allowed so far. So they've gone back and they've rewritten it and proposed this new business and financial plan. And Rhett makes this point here that this is a shift away from essentially the fundamental principles of Baptist congregationalism to Presbyterian elder rule as applied to convention governance. Essentially what's happening is the executive committee is trying to act like a Presbyterian elder body over the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention instead of allowing us to do debate on this. And one of the things Rhett has said, one of the things I've said in our efforts to secure increased transparency in the Southern Baptist Convention is that, look, maybe the messengers at the meeting that maybe we finally get to debate this on don't want it. Maybe we lose the vote, but we should at least be able to have the debate and take the vote. And that's not what's happening here. And the new plan falls even shorter. It muddies the water further. And so here's the language that we currently have in Article 14. It says that members of cooperating Southern Baptist churches shall have access to information from the records of the Southern Baptist Convention entities regarding income, expenditures, debts, reserves, operating balances, and salary structures. So we shall, that's, there's no wiggle room when you see shall in sort of official documents. We shall have access to it. This is a right that Southern Baptist Convention churches have under the current business and financial plan. And we aren't even getting this, and he points out that this is like a member or a shareholder's right to inspect documents. But in practice, it's a fight. Entities dodge requests entirely. And the two that didn't respond at all were the IMB and NAM. Some describe the salary structure rather than the information from entity records. And Rhett argues this is essentially gaslighting those who are asking for it. And he sort of details here like the responses that he got back from our different entities. SEBTS, essentially said, you cannot disclose this information anywhere. And then they sent a salary scale that discloses the differing tiers of base salaries. That doesn't really get to the question at hand. SBTS sent a salary scale that gives the median base salary for each professional classification level. Gateway did provide the salary scales for faculty, staff, and the president. New Orleans verified church membership. That's fine. And then sent him a document that had a salary scale noting that the upper and lower ends don't match current actuals. That, brothers and sisters, is not transparency. Midwestern did not respond to multiple requests, refusing to comply with Article 14. Southwestern did not respond to multiple requests, refusing to comply with Article 14. The ERLC provided salary scales, base salary only. NAM, after multiple requests, finally provided their process for setting salaries. Guess what the process is? The trustees set the salaries. That's a refusal to comply with Article 14. And the same back from the IMB. Here's our process. What's the process? The trustees set the salaries. Well, can we see that? No, you can't. And so this was just the request for the salary scales. Now, some of the other information is published and made available in reports, but this isn't. So that's why, Rhett is arguing that we need this 990 level disclosure because, it gives us a chance to have a benchmark for evaluating how the trustees are performing their duties. This is about good governance. It's about Christian governance. And this disclosure gives messengers a tool to evaluate the trustees that they appoint. Executive compensation is just one of the major decisions trustees make. But knowing a CEO's pay forces trustees to justify it. It's essentially sunlight. And sunlight, as we know, is the best disinfectant. And we're Christians. Why should we be hiding this? We should be operating in the light. And so by hiding this, it shields the trustees from scrutiny and undercuts true accountability. And so as it stands today, the entities don't adhere to the transparency currently promised. We don't have that transparency. And even if we did, it's not enough to be able to know what's, if the trustees are really doing their job. And this new plan, and we have to look at this language here, it's pretty tricky. The new plan doesn't fix this. What it essentially does is it codifies and makes official the way that the current rules are being evaded. So in the disclosure section of the new plan, this is now what it says. It says compensation processes, personnel practices, and salary structures vary among convention entities and will be described upon written request to the respective entity's chief financial officer to any member in good standing of a church in friendly cooperation with the convention. That will be described is really important here, because if we adopt this new plan, essentially what we will get from our entities is this description of how they set compensation and salary structures. It won't be a hard number. It won't be anywhere close to it. You know what I think it will be? It will be the trustees set the salaries. The trustees handle this information. Trust the trustees. Well, we're losing trust rapidly in the trustees, and for very good reason. And so if this new plan is adopted, messengers will lose all access to records and details. They will only have a right to a staff description of these processes. And as Rhett says again, this change codifies the current system's failures. In the Baptist Press article that reported this, Dr. Jorg, the chairman and president of the executive committee, he said that, look, if we discover deficiencies, the business and financial plan can be amended until we feel it is adequate for its purpose. Which, I mean, maybe that's even a debate too. What is the purpose of the business and financial plan? Is it to essentially shield the trustees and the entities from transparency and accountability? Or is it to equip the churches to hold the trustees in trust, even as the trustees hold the entities in trust? So we think, Rhett thinks, I think, Center for Baptist Leadership thinks, and I'll note that many other people across the convention, even across sort of the standard conservative, moderate, liberal divide that exists in the Southern Baptist Convention, this is an issue that people from all walks of Southern Baptist Convention life want to see acted on. But you might disagree. That's okay. So what's the Baptist way to solve this? To allow a full and free debate on the floor of the convention this June in Dallas. As it stands today, essentially, unless messengers are able to overcome and overrule the platform, it looks like the executive committee is pretty intent on squashing that debate. Rhett gives some other, reasons here why this is problematic. There's reduced disclosure. And then there's another sort of more meta point here, which is that as cooperative program allocations dwindle, entities and visionary leaders, quote visionary, in the Southern Baptist Convention are going to look for other funding models. They're going to look to raise directly from the churches. Some entities are receiving increased allotments, allocated directly from the churches who don't want to give to the cooperative program anymore. But it'll also incentivize outside fundraising as well. And why are they doing that? It says that the proposed change narrows restrictions on soliciting churches to those in friendly cooperation with the convention. So it narrows the restrictions. So does this mean that the entities can now tap non-SBC churches for funding? And the question is, are our entities essentially preparing for maybe a post-Baptist general evangelical Great Commission program future? John Whitehead on the advisory board here at the Center for Baptist Leadership, he essentially seems to think so. We included a tweet from him here where he said, an unspoken problem in the SBC. Some of the institutional leaders are headed for the exits and they want to take assets with them. And then he says, look, I'm not prepared to name names yet, but if you adopt Sam Rainer's position in this Baptist Review article that he links to there and plan forward, you're looking to become an evangelical institution. That is some sort of generic evangelical institution that is not historically Baptist, that is not tethered to the Baptist faith and message, that is not trying to be particularly and specifically Baptist in line with the Southern Baptist Convention, but just sort of general evangelical gospel sharing institutions, which, hey, that's great. There are a lot of general evangelical gospel sharing churches and entities and organizations. That's not what the Southern Baptist Convention is. But if we can't get this transparency, if we can't rebuild the trust, that's where we're heading. And people like Sam Rainer, son of Tom Rainer, formerly of Lifeway, who is one of the greatest examples of some financial malfeasance in the Southern Baptist Convention in recent years, who was awarded a $1 million golden parachute on his way out of Lifeway after essentially running Lifeway into the ground. That was approved by a single trustee. $1 million exit plan approved by a single trustee after essentially poor management of an entity of the Southern Baptist Convention. Brett also notes that the ERLC has been a big topic of conversation, has been receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from outside liberal foundations. That's eroding trust in the Southern Baptist Convention. And so, look, if outside funding is needed to supplement the cooperative program, then that creates competition. So maybe the outside donors support us being Baptists. Maybe they don't. But how will we know? We can't get this information. And if this new business and financial plan is adopted, we definitely won't get the information. We'll have to wait until another hard-hitting investigative report on, dark money funding our Southern Baptist Convention entities to be written to find out we had a problem. The way we can avoid that and to rebuild trust and move together in terms of fulfilling the Great Commission, doing theological training, planting churches, sending missionaries with trust and cooperation, is to be more transparent. He also mentions bloating reserves, and this is something that's been an issue with NAM. NAM has faced criticism for bloating its reserves beyond what the bylaws currently allows, but the new plan is silent on maximum reserve funds. And so it removes the requirement for convention approval on that. Just at so many different turns with this new business and financial plan, it's codifying obscurity. It is not enhancing transparency. And to sell it to us as if it were to enhance transparency is to try to sell us a dog and tell us it's a racehorse. And that's just not going to cut it. Rhett says that the proposed plan trades the promise of hard facts for flowery institutional assurances. It provides little to no new information. It repackages old information in a less transparent manner. It's lipstick on a pig, and Southern Baptists deserve better. So if you're listening to this and you care about restoring trust through transparency, you need to come to Dallas and be prepared to demand new levels of transparency. This plan to enhance transparency does anything but. It further obscures it, whispering, just trust us, to the churches that foot the bills. And that's the problem, as Rhett says here. As many of you know, we don't. I've heard many anecdotal points of information that as people come and join Southern Baptist churches, at least anybody who's in the know, and it was funny, I was asked, well, how would people know this? And I'm like, well, there's quite a few of us doing the job of trying to spread the message of the problems here. They join these churches and they ask, is our money going to the ERLC? Is our money going to NAM? Is our money going to other problematic entities in the SBC? How can we know that the money we're giving to the Southern Baptist Convention is being stewarded according to Baptist commitments on church planting? Are we planting through NAM, what are essentially like non-denominational, evangelical, egalitarian or egalitarian light churches? I mean, NAM partnered with Saddleback's successor, Andy Wood, and his co-pastor wife. We've seen lots of other examples of essentially NAM church plants having husband and wife pastor pairs. NAM continues to promote essentially soft wokeness, DEI light. They're doing another new sort of like church planting in a multi-ethnic setting here, training soon. You go look at the people who are a part of it, go look at their social media. I mean, these guys, they're not picking up on the message that DEI is dead, that CRT is, essentially reverse racism. The things that like conservatives in the culture, not even in the church, are, totally, awake to now and fighting back on. Southern Baptists are still peddling it at the ERLC and other places. So you need to read this article from Rhett. If you have any questions, reach out to him. He makes himself incredibly available. This brother is really, he is David running out there to face Goliath, the small Southern Baptist church pastor facing down the entities, the vast majority of whom are opposed to this. And I'll say one last thing on this, and it's this. One of the things that's been raised as an objection to this came from the IMB saying that it would somehow endanger missionaries. That is not even close to the truth. There's nothing in this reporting that would capture or disclose missionaries. And even then, Rhett reworded the language of his amendment to try to clarify that, even though it didn't need to be. He was like, okay, well, let's just clarify it. So behind the scenes, entity heads are working against this. They're the Goliath in this situation. They're being backed up by the executive committee on it. And it just, this is not how Baptist life and Baptist convention and Baptist cooperation is supposed to work. So read the article, get your mind right on the issues with the current business and financial plan, talk to Rhett, talk to other pastors, and be prepared to come to Dallas. And if we have to vote this down, which I would say we have to, like we cannot proactively codify this in Dallas. Look, if we do that, we can continue to fight to amend it. But really, I think you just have to ask yourself, what are they hiding? If they have nothing to hide, what is the problem here with increased transparency? Increased transparency should just show us, in an ideal world, our entities are being very well run. They're being stewarded by faithful, informed, godly men and women who are executing on mission, and showing proper oversight and stewardship of the money that's being given out of the goodness of Southern Baptist hearts, and offering plate dollars that are being funneled through the cooperative program to our seminaries and our other entities for the sake of the Great Commission. Like, I mean, that's what we should see, right? And if we see something that's not that, well, then we have a chance to hold them accountable and fix it. And then on top of that, even if there's nothing wrong, if men were angels, we would need no government. Well, even within the Southern Baptist Convention, men and women aren't angels. And so the light of accountability, the knowledge that we will have to defend the executive compensation that we're setting at these entities, we will have to defend the conflicts of interest that we are reviewing and approving or blocking to the convention. We are going to have to defend why we're taking these money from outside sources, and guarantee the Southern Baptist Convention that they won't compromise our mission. Knowing that will help our trustees better serve the convention than they currently do. And again, I don't know why anybody wouldn't want that. It really seems like a no-brainer, but it's quite an impasse right now, I think, between the churches and the people in the pews versus the platform, as are many things in Southern Baptist life. So I hope that this article helps you out. Take a look at it, talk to Rhett, and stay tuned. Rhett's going to continue to do more work on this. I would also say this, like, if you're a Southern Baptist pastor or a state convention director, I would think you would really want to sort of take this on, right? Like, if you're a state convention director, the problems with cooperative program giving. You know why it's down. It's down because of transparency. It's down because of mismanagement. It's down because of entities like the ERLC. And if you want your state convention to be able to thrive, we need giving to come back up. We want to be able to plant more healthy churches, send more missionaries, train more seminary students. I mean, this is what we need. It's like we're like Gandalf, in Fellowship of the Ring, when Bilbo's trying to give up the ring, and Bilbo thinks that Gandalf is trying to steal the ring from him. And Gandalf says, "I'm not trying to rob you. I'm trying to help you." That's what we're trying to do with this effort. I know that's what Rhett's trying to do with it, and other people working on it. So enough on that point. Check it out. Talk to Rhett. I'm going to stop sharing that screen right now and come back in here. So that was, I don't know, we're like 30 minutes in here. So that's a good first sort of bucket for this wrap up. It's really important. Stay tuned on that. What's next? Well, let's go on from financial transparency to what's happening with the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And we'll take a look at Christ Over All's website here. So this is Megan Basham's article. We did a big Twitter space on it last night with a lot of guests, including David Schrock, Megan Basham, John Whitehead, David Mitzenmacher, my good friend Jim Paff from Washington, D.C. stopped by. We had an immigration expert, my good friend Grant Newman, stop by as well. It was co-hosted by Christ Over All and Center for Baptist Leadership. And we talked about some other articles in this theme, but I just wanted to draw your attention to this overall theme that's going on at Christ Over All this month, as it's coming to a close, on the Ethics and Religious Liberty Conundrum. So this is their website. We'll take a look. See, this is their top theme, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Conundrum. And they're asking, what is the ERLC? What role does it play in the SBC? What can it do to regain the trust of Southern Baptists? And those were questions that really came out of our 2024 annual meeting, and not just the 2024 annual meeting, right? Like, this has been an issue that's been percolating in Southern Baptist Convention life for about a decade now. And there had been efforts to defund the ERLC. Those hadn't really gotten much traction. There's the whole issue of Russell Moore's departure from the Southern Baptist Convention and his flat out lies about things that were happening at the executive committee, the way he attacked Mike Stone and others. I've plugged it before, but you can listen to John Whitehead's 2-part podcast, our very first podcast at Center for Baptist Leadership. The more people that listen to that, the better. I mean, just the ERLC has been a mess for a while, but then it sort of has come to a head again because we took a vote not to defund it, but per bylaw 25 in the SBC bylaws to abolish the entity. That's the language that's used in bylaw 25. And the way that works is you have to have 2 consecutive votes at consecutive annual meetings that clear the 50% threshold. So it's not like the law amendment, which needed 66%. This just needs a 50% threshold. Tom Maskell from Founders Ministries and Grace Baptist Church made that motion last year, and it got more votes than I think something like that has ever gotten before, signaling a lot of concern, distrust, and need for reform at the ERLC. That's been a topic of conversation for the last year now, and it was significantly heightened, of course, when Brent Leatherwood praised Biden's dropping out of the presidential campaign, essentially using Democrat talking points, saying that Biden was doing this out of the goodness of his heart for the good of the country. We all know that wasn't true. That wasn't true at all. Biden didn't even know he was dropping out. Somebody auto-penned it or something like that. And that was sort of the last straw for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Committee's trustees, in particular chairman Kevin Smith at the time, started a firestorm where Kevin tried to rein Brent in. I think essentially put him on leave. I understand this is, I'm saying I think Brent essentially just told Kevin no, just was insubordinate to his chairman, said, no, I'm not going on leave. Kevin said, well, then you're fired. And so then they put out a press release saying Brent had been relieved of his duties. And then lo and behold, who would ignite a national media firestorm about the removal of the president of the ERLC? Like, why does CNN care about that? Why would Politico and MSNBC and other national, essentially regime media sources care about that? Well, I bet they care about it because Russell Moore told them to care about it. And so after what was like 48 hours of a media firestorm, was Brent removed from his duties? No, he was reinstated. And who actually ended up resigning? Kevin Smith, which also I just cannot help but point out that Kevin Smith is an African-American. He's a Black man. And, such a big emphasis on diversity in the SBC from these types. But when it came down to it, when it came down to brass tacks here, Brent, the white man, got to stay and Kevin had to go. And so that's been hanging over Brent's tenure ever since that happened last summer. And we haven't gotten good or honest answers about what really happened there. I've pieced together the story from conversations with people behind the scenes, and it's all alleged. And I've said that I think it's alleged. We don't have hard facts or data. Kevin Smith won't talk about it. Brent Leatherwood won't talk about it. The other trustees won't talk about it. So what are we supposed to do as Southern Baptists? All just look the other way? Okay, we fired an entity president. No, wait, we didn't. We rehired him and we got rid of the chairman. What happened here? Nothing to see here, folks. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain is essentially the message that we're getting here. And so Christ Overall, led by David Schrock, Stephen Wellum, professor of systematic theology at Southern, which also let me just pause here for a second. Stephen Wellum is one of the most respected and trusted and appreciated sort of modern Southern Baptist theologians. Even a lot of the people that I would disagree with in Southern Baptist life on things respect him. I know Stephen Wellum decently well personally. He's very conservative. You would think that if somebody like Dr. Wellum, who is helping run Christ Overall, and of course had to greenlight this monthly theme along with David Schrock and the other editors and board members at Christ Overall, you think maybe you would pay attention to that? I mean, if you can get his systematic theology textbook, he's got his first, the first volume out, he's got other volumes coming, and you can trust Wellum on his theology and trust him in the way that he leads himself in the classroom at Southern. Maybe you should trust him on this one. I mean, maybe you don't want to trust me. Maybe you don't want to trust Megan Basham, but just bear in mind that one of the main minds behind Christ Overall is Stephen Wellum. And if Stephen Wellum is seeing major concerns with the ERLC, maybe you should hear him out. I saw some reactions today online to Megan's article and other things from sort of the typical crew of the nothing to see here boys in the Baptist convention. And they're just like, they just dismiss these concerns like out of hand. It's like, oh, it's foolishness to be, considering voting to abolish the ERLC, even though we've made it very clear that those who are arguing for that action right now are saying the vote to abolish is not necessarily to get rid of it, but to spark the needed reform that is necessary for it to get back on mission, regain trust, get new trustees, get new leadership, get new staff. I mean, if you have another way of doing that, of just sort of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission trustees, chairman, Brent Leatherwood, sort of deciding amongst themselves, wow, we've messed up here, guys. We're just all going to walk away. And, we were the wrong people for the job. We realize it now. No need to take a vote. We'll turn this over to you to correct it. If you think that that's going to happen, I mean, let me know. I don't have much confidence that that's going to happen. Thus far, they've seen almost essentially immune to listening to any serious criticism and really have done nothing over the last year but ramp up what's essentially a PR campaign to say, look at what we're doing. Here's what we're up to. And as we got into detail last night on the Twitter space, like a lot of it is essentially just posturing, trying to take credit for things that are going to pass without them, trying to use what are essentially photo ops as proof of doing good work on behalf of the Southern Baptist Convention. They recently had some pastors up there for some meetings. And you look at the picture of the people who were there in the room. I mean, it wasn't people who have any concerns with the ERLC. It's some of their loudest defenders, right? It was people like Jared Cornutt, who works with the Baptist Review, who is squarely, from my perspective at least, in the moderate camp of the Southern Baptist Convention. It was interesting to see Nathan Lorick up there. He's the director of the SBTC. And, I know that Texas Baptists know that there are issues with the ERLC. So I would just say interesting to see Nathan there. They had a lot of staff on hand too. Who picked the people to come up there? Was it Dan Darling picking them through the Land Center in coordination with his job at the ERLC? Was it just sort of handpicked cheerleaders? It's hard to say. Like, there wasn't anybody in those rooms or in those pictures that's somebody that's like, you know what, I'm not really sold on the ERLC, so let me see what they're doing. That certainly wasn't the case. Anyway, Christ Overall, whole monthly theme. Let's explore the theme together here for a second, and we'll just show you what's in it, right? So look over here on the right side of the screen, and you can see that it begins with David Schrock's "What Do We Do with the ERLC?" an open letter to Southern Baptists. And in it, David Schrock details that he reached out to the ERLC and said, hey, we're going to do this. We've got a lot of questions. Here are the questions. Could we get some answers? To this day, he's heard nothing. David Schrock lives 50 miles south of Washington, D.C. He could easily, if the ERLC wanted to talk to him, they could invite him up for lunch. They haven't done that. So the open letter from David Schrock, and then a great article from Mark Coppinger, also on the board at the Center for Baptist Leadership. And then a two-part history from Tom Nettles, very respected Southern Baptist historian, on sort of the past and the present iterations of the ERLC. And then another article from Rhett, particularly on the transparency and trust issues with the ERLC. Good article from John Whitehead on how and why the ERLC continues to divide Southern Baptists. Will it divide us ever more? Which is a great forevermore, a little pun, obviously, on Russell Moore's tenure there. And then David Mitzenmacher had a great piece on a roadmap for reform. He laid out 6 objective things that they could do to reform the ERLC. And he essentially said they're going to need new leadership. Like, it will take new leadership to reform the ERLC. And then an article from John Michael LaRue on how he's lost trust in them. And then let's just look a little bit more closely about the sort of bombshell investigative report from Megan Basham, too busy with woke stuff, the all too invisible and inconsequential ERLC. And so this is her article here. Again, we talked about it last night on the Twitter space, so you can listen to that. But I also just want to kind of show you guys, like show and tell here on this wrap up. So she starts out with this great story of how in 1993, when the ERLC was then the Christian Life Commission, They helped through the work of Mike Whitehead, John Whitehead's dad. They helped write and organize and pass the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, along with other organizations too that were a part of this, like the Christian Legal Society, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, even at the time, the ACLU and People for American Way. And this was, essentially, this was ultimately signed into law by President Bill Clinton. And John Whitehead shared this great picture of his dad in the Oval Office with Bill Clinton. And at the time, John, as a child, was battling cancer, and they actually prayed for John's healing. And so Clinton signed RFRA into law. And, Megan writes here, the reason that ERLC was in the room where RFRA happened was because of Mike Whitehead, the ERLC's general counsel. And then at the end there, a quote from Mark Whitehead says that Mike Whitehead, our involvement in the litigation was probably the first major involvement by Southern Baptists in legislative drafting. And because he stopped representing the ERLC 2 years later, it was also one of their lasts. And Mike Whitehead says that as it stands today, the ERLC is not really viewed as being actively helpful on advancing conservative politics on the Hill. And everybody else that Megan talked to about the story said the same thing. There's a lot of really sort of like damning quotes in here from very senior conservative activists, Christian conservative activists on Capitol Hill, and their opinions of the ERLC, which range from never heard of them to aren't they just a never Trumper group? Or as my friend Grant Newman from the immigration accountability space said last night, in his over a decade working on immigration issues, he has never seen the ERLC be on the right side of an immigration bill or policy priority as it's going through Congress. Senator Lee had nothing positive to say about them, wasn't aware of them. Rachel Bovard, who's had an extensive career on the Hill, has never seen them or heard from them that she remembers. She says, in 12 years on the Hill, I don't ever remember hearing from the ERLC. And she worked in positions that should have and would have heard from the ERLC if they were active, effective, and helpful. Another staffer said they have zero effectiveness. Never once saw them at a coalition meeting on the Hill or visiting our office. That was one Republican senator's former legislative director, who now works at a top conservative policy group. So this was sort of, one bucket I mentioned on the space last night was sort of, at best, I guess you could say, the ERLC is just unknown and not present in the room where major conversations are happening. At worst, they're actively counterproductive. And this really is the quote that so many jumped on yesterday, and understandably so. This was coming from Eric Tietzel, who, as a Southern Baptist and who has been smack dab in the middle of conservative Christian political work for over a decade, maybe close to 2 decades now. Worked for Senator Josh Hawley as his chief of staff. He was director of faith outreach for Marco Rubio, 2016 presidential run. And this is what he had to say. Right here, you can see it. He says, as a Southern Baptist who happens to be an expert in what they're supposed to be doing, I can tell you that they're completely and entirely worse than useless. They are actively counterproductive to the ends that Southern Baptists ought to expect from an entity that purports to be the public policy arm of their convention. I don't know how you come back from that. I mean, this is not, this isn't an outrage artist or a grievance grifter on Twitter. This is coming from a man, Eric Tietzel, who has done more and seen more conservative policy work, has been in more legislative battles, and who certainly knows the system and the process, quite frankly, better than Brent Leatherwood does now and probably ever will. And for someone like Eric Tietzel to say they're completely and entirely worse than useless, I really don't know how you come back from something like that. Again, I expect the regular crowd, the crowd who does sort of the monkey dance of hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, whatever it is, to look the other way. They'll bury their head in the sand. They'll pretend this doesn't exist. When we get to the convention in Dallas, they will pretend that this quote was never said, that this article was never written. And they'll just say, look, there's nothing to see here, folks. This is something to see. This is something to think about and take to heart and ask ourselves as Southern Baptists, what is happening to our name in Washington, D.C., when it's the ERLC who bears our name around Capitol Hill and in these meetings where they are being completely and entirely worse than useless. And of course, a lot of this came out, as Megan details, from the years under Russell Moore's tenure. And, the guy who followed Russell Moore, Brent Leatherwood, I mean, it's just a statement of fact to say that Brent Leatherwood is a Russell Moore acolyte. It's a statement of fact to say that the ghost of Russell Moore still haunts the ERLC. I think it's just a statement of fact to say that, Russell Moore still, I think, exerts significant influence on what's happening at the ERLC. I mean, and this isn't some sort of conspiracy theory, right? Like if you worked for a guy, if you like the guy, if he's sort of your mentor, you're going to keep talking to him. Like I am sure Brent Leatherwood and Russell Moore are in group chats, right? Like group chats were a big topic of conversation this week with what went on with the plans to bomb the Houthis in Yemen, Pete Hegseth, JD Vance, Mike Waltz, and this Atlantic journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg being swept up in it, right? So like group chats make the world go round for good or for ill. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Brent Leatherwood is in group chats with Russell Moore, 100%. Russell Moore is still exerting significant influence on the ERLC, 100% to this day. And I really do think that, excising the ghost of Russell Moore out of the machine of the SBC, everywhere his influence can or would be found, is a noble mission for our convention right now. We've seen the trajectory that Russell Moore has taken. He has aligned himself fundamentally with like the new Christian left, the progressive Christian left, at every turn, before he left the SBC and certainly since he left the SBC. Russell Moore is not a good representative of Southern Baptists. He's not a good representative of 30% of Southern Baptists, and he's certainly not a good representative of like 80 or 90% of Southern Baptists, which is what the ERLC should be doing. The ERLC should be doing work that essentially faithfully represents 80 to 90% of Southern Baptists, as guided and informed through the resolutions that we pass, through the Baptist faith and message, through just basic Christian positions on things like life, family, marriage, transgenderism, things like that. Russell Moore wasn't doing that. He was representing maybe 10% of the most liberal Baptists in our convention and representing sort of an outside the convention take on what Baptists should be from a more sort of progressive, winsome to both the right and the left approach. John Whitehead detailed that pretty well last night, where he was like, essentially the theology, the public theology of the ERLC is, if we can't get the left and the right equally excited about the work that we're doing so that we can have an equal opportunity to share the gospel and present Christ in the political and the public square with the left and the right, like we're failing at our mission. That is not the mission of the ERLC. And so she gives other examples too. We didn't touch on this in the space last night, but I think it's like pretty important to point out is that, okay, so maybe the ERLC isn't as effective in Washington, D.C. as we'd like them to be. Brent Leatherwood doesn't live in D.C. He lives in Nashville, right? So it's essentially a commuter job for him. They have a headquarters in Nashville, right? But like they've got very lean, young, lean as in few, young as just young and inexperienced staff there. And so, well, maybe Brent Leatherwood is more effective in his own backyard in Washington, in Nashville, Tennessee. There's been some major fights in Tennessee lately on issues of particular concern to Southern Baptists and Christians, on transgenderism issues, on Vanderbilt's funding of essentially a horrific transgender clinic. Who exposed that? Matt Walsh, not the ERLC. Who pushed a bill through the Tennessee State House and Senate to try to stop that? Not the ERLC. So let's see, Chris Todd is a Tennessee state congressman, and he sort of helped lead this fight. And then also House Majority Leader William Lamberth, who was a principal architect and co-sponsor of the bill to stop drag performances in public spaces in Tennessee. So this is a little bit different than the stuff with Vanderbilt. This was to stop drag performances. He said he couldn't remember receiving any support or involvement from the ERLC on this. So what are they doing? Well, they are doing things like advocating for red flag laws, which are essentially gun control laws, right? Like those are very questionable, arguably unconstitutional laws. And that is what Brent Leatherwood gave himself to. And that, Tennessee Republicans blocked. Sorry, I just got Siri just made me jump. So Leatherwood blocked that. Leatherwood sort of was leading on an effort to secure a gun control bill that the Tennessee Republicans rejected. So he's not doing any better in his own backyard. And then also this very sort of, again, just sort of eye-opening little story here from Tammy Fitzgerald. She is the executive director of North Carolina Values Coalition. She served on the ERLC board from 2012 to 2019. And Megan said this on the X Space last night. It was fascinating. She said that, Tammy thinks she essentially got appointed to the board because she was a woman, because we've gone through a period of time in the Southern Baptist Convention where our trustee appointments have been made not according to merit and not according to alignment with Southern Baptist theology and commitments, but according to DEI standards, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, J.D. Greear is famous for this. He is famous for saying, I am going to make as many trustee appointments as I can be minorities and women. Like, there's no other way around the fact that that is some like Christianized version of DEI. It's not even Christian. It's just DEI applied to the Southern Baptist Convention. Tammy, however, is a strong conservative. And she said, I think I got appointed because they wanted a woman, but they didn't realize what kind of woman they were getting. That is, a hard charger, well-informed political activist who was unafraid to voice her opinions. And she said at the meeting of the ERLC Executive Committee, which she was on before the convention started, or maybe it was at the meeting of just the executive, I think it's just the broader Executive Committee, and Russell Moore was sort of sharing his agenda for the ERLC. He said that he was going to tone down its focus on quote unquote culture war stuff. And by culture wars, we mean the absolutely critical fights to protect life, to defend marriage, to fight against transgenderism, things like that. He wanted to tone that down. And instead of stuff like abortion and fighting gay marriage, Russell Moore wanted to focus on issues like immigration, sex abuse, and racial injustice. And Fitzgerald was offended by that. She says, as somebody who had long fought in those culture wars, she took offense. And she said, at the meeting, it is insulting to us for those who have worked in the culture wars for years and spent our lifetimes working on the culture wars to say it's over and we're changing the tone, because that insinuates that the tone was wrong. What was the reaction from the staff? She said, stone cold silence. No one said a word. And then after the meeting, I was surrounded by all the PhDs who were Moore's acolytes telling me how wrong I was. It was all insulting. Fitzgerald said from then on, the ERLC became more distinguished for Moore's very public opposition to Donald Trump, a position few Southern Baptists shared, than for its policy positions. I mean, I think that's right. Like what is the ERLC known for? I mean, it is known for Russell Moore's opposition to Donald Trump that is so intense and enduring that it's essentially become the guy's personality. Like Russell Moore's personality these days is being anti-Trump. It bleeds through everything he writes and everything he does at Christianity Today, and it continues to infect the ERLC, even from a distance. Eric Tietzel goes on to say he believes the ERLC will have zero influence on the Trump administration. He might be invited to some sort of fake coalition gathering, but that's not influence. And so like just continue sort of like just terrible quotes that Megan didn't plant the seed for these. She said, last night on the space, if somebody had responded to her and said, the ERLC is fantastic, we love the work they're doing, we're well informed by them, she would have printed it. But of the 20 people she reached out to, she didn't get any of that back. And so she goes on to just she talks about the recent flurry of photo ops from the DC meeting that they had, organized by Brent Leatherwood and Dan Darling, no doubt, a couple of head pat meetings from some senators and from some staffers. But what does it mean? Well, I think I know what it means. I think the ERLC knows that they're in trouble, and they're trying to make it look like they're doing something. And honestly, fundamentally, I think they're trying to buy support. I think that they handpicked pastors from across the Southern Baptist Convention who already support them. And so that one of those pastors can show up at a mic in Dallas when the motion to abolish the ERLC is made. And that pastor can say, I went to DC with the ERLC, and they took us around meetings, and they showed us the work that they were doing. And it was really impactful, and they're doing great. There's nothing to see here, folks. You just need to get on the next meeting. Everything's fine. Business as usual, full steam ahead. Like that is why. I mean, maybe they'll be smarter than that. Maybe because I've said it now, they won't do it. But we don't gamble as Southern Baptists, but pay attention to who's at the mics defending them when it gets to Dallas. I wouldn't be surprised if it's somebody who was on their recent trip to DC. So, and then, kind of peeling away all those layers, unknown, ineffective, and counterproductive. Then Eric Tietzel just also points out that they're not being well run. And fundamentally, they're not being well run because they can't attract top talent. And this kind of gets back into the larger conversation of how are the trustees managing our entities? This should be seriously concerning. If you're a trustee of the ERLC, and for years now, the ERLC, under the leadership of Brent Leatherwood, has not been able to attract top serious talent to help run their Washington, D.C. office. I mean, what does that tell you about him as the leader of the organization? Is he the right leader? I mean, it would be hard to think that he is if that's the case. And so, that's what's going on here. I think there's two people working full-time in their DC office who are very young, who don't have a Rolodex, who don't have influence, who can read the bills, maybe write some letters, shepherd a petition through the process. But, what are they really doing? So you've got to read this article from Megan. There's a lot here. I've been going for a while on it already. And I really love this quote from David Keller, chief of staff for Senator Jim Banks. He said that the culture war issues matter. When he was asked sort of ideal qualities of policy allies, he cited the American Principles Project run by Terry Schilling, who doesn't shy away from his group's mission to engage aggressively on so-called culture war issues related to life and family. And Keller said this is a great quote. He said, on Capitol Hill, if taxes are too high, we can cut them. If there are too many regulations, we can roll them back. But if we lose our culture, which was built on Christian values, we aren't getting it back. Groups like APP provide resources, ideas, and policy objectives, and work with offices across the Hill to amplify messaging to people who care and are motivated to act. They really see the mission and set the tone. And shouldn't that be what the ERLC is doing? Shouldn't it be a force to be reckoned with? And currently it isn't. And so she closes her article saying this: there's a great difference between political advocacy that is effective and often unseen because it is done without cameras and PR campaigns, and making trips to Washington, D.C., where the meetings are visible but largely inconsequential. Truly, if the Southern Baptist Convention is going to have the kind of impact in Washington that it did in the days of Mike Whitehead, then the ERLC must show that it is more dedicated to its mission than its image, and to make sure that the mission represents a consensus of Southern Baptist views. And I think she's absolutely right there. I think that what's happened over the last year with the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission is they don't really care about change. They don't really care about reforming and getting back on mission. They fundamentally care about making you think that they are through aggressive, email outreach, photo ops, and other things like that to sort of put a nice gloss, or as Rhett Burns said in his article about financial transparency, lipstick on a pig. But there's been no real change. There's been no real outreach to the people who have concerns with them. And, like, I have no ill will against Brent Leatherwood. I think Brent Leatherwood might have some ill will against me and some of the people I work with, maybe not. But like, there's been no outreach to like our side of the aisle. Like, I mean, even on some of these other issues that I'm working on in the Southern Baptist Convention, we'll make some outreach to the other side of the aisle, so to speak, especially on financial transparency. And look, sometimes you just got to square off, right? It's like, I think you're wrong. You think I'm wrong. And so we're going to press forward. We're going to butt heads. We're going to take this to a vote like we did on the law amendment. We won it 1 year. We lost it another year. We've been completely vindicated on that one, for the record, and we're going to vote on it again, Lord willing. Looking forward to that vote in Dallas. But, again, it's like, I'm not running a Southern Baptist Convention entity. I'm not stewarding CP, tithe dollars. I am Brent Leatherwood's constituent. Like, he represents me. I don't represent him. He represents me, and the people like me. And he represents Tom Askell and John Whitehead, who serves on his board. And has Brent done anything to sort of like listen to the people who have significant and serious concerns with the direction of the ERLC? Or is it really just, we are going to ignore all of our critics, no matter how helpful their suggestions might be, and press forward with our agenda? I really think fundamentally it's been the latter, and that's why they're in the position that they're in. To kind of wrap up this section, and I'm having a lot of fun. I know this is kind of going long here. I don't, maybe not quite John Harris Conversations That Matter length, but we might be getting close. But let me wrap up this section on Megan's piece, and I just say this to the people who are thinking about what's going on with the ERLC. And there are a lot of people who think it's beyond repair. There's nothing we can do to salvage it. There are some people like John Michael LaRue who gave a really impassioned call for them to, reject wokeness, reject DEI, reject all the stuff that we're seeing President Trump and Elon Musk reject at the federal level, that we're seeing corporate America reject at the corporate level. It's like, we're finally realizing we had this 10-year disastrous experiment in essentially, government sanctioned reverse racism against, white people, Christians, heterosexuals, you name it, as we go down sort of the intersectional list of the, oppressors and oppressed. And the ERLC was all in on social justice, all in on wokeness. I mean, the conference that they put on with the Gospel Coalition on MLK 50 is such a disaster. It is such an embarrassment. And that is one of the conference. They got money. I believe it was from Fetzer, might have been from Democracy Fund. You can check my math on that. But I think it was Fetzer. Well, it could have been Democracy Fund. They took progressive money from outside sources to put on one of the most woke and ridiculous conferences in current evangelical history, in partnership with, of course, the Gospel Coalition. So they were all in advancing, this is what is essentially like race baiting, divisive, rhetoric and programs and unbiblical approaches to these issues in Southern Baptist Convention life. And they never apologized for it. They just sort of like kind of quit doing it as aggressively as they had been doing it. And since then, they've said nothing to kind of course correct or go in the other direction. So again, even while Trump and Elon Musk and other conservatives are going after this, I think there's an organization out there called Center for Biblical Unity, people doing work on this stuff. They just essentially shut up. They didn't correct themselves. They're not leading the fight against wokeness. They just kind of sort of stopped pushing wokeness. That was sort of John Michael LaRue's impassioned plea on our space yesterday was, I won't be able to trust them until I see them actively rowing in the opposite direction against wokeness. And they're certainly not doing that yet. But he was saying that in the context of maybe this is something that could be reformed. And so whether you're in the bucket of, I'd like to see it reformed, I'd like to see it's mission focused, I'd like to see new trustees, new leadership, new staff, or you're in the bucket of, let's just get rid of this thing. And John Whitehead makes a good point in his article that the ERLC is an experiment. There's always that sort of the plague of, the present that makes you think the way we've done something is how we've always done it and how we always have to do it going forward. Well, we have not always had the ERLC. We've had other iterations of it. We've not always had the ERLC acting the way it is currently under Leatherwood/Moore's enduring regime. There's Richard Land before that. And, so, it's not always been like this. It doesn't have to continue. I would put it this way. I do think the Southern Baptist Convention needs and should have a public policy arm and an ethics arm that's helping inform and equip Southern Baptist churches and pastors how to deal with the trickiest issues of our day from an ethical standpoint, from a biblical standpoint. The questions that are arising, they're coming at light speed. Transgenderism, transhumanism, questions on IVF, questions on how Christians should approach and use AI, and who knows what the next frontier will be. The left dreams up some terrible new that hideous strength iteration of the new humanity every 24 hours. But that's what something like the ERLC should be there to help us navigate. So they should be helping churches navigate that. They should be forcefully and effectively defending Baptist interests in the public square in Washington, D.C., in the executive branch. I think we should have something like that. It doesn't have to be the ERLC. So we should have a public policy arm. We don't need the ERLC. So you can hold those things in tension. And so whether you just want it gone, you're like, let's vote to get rid of it in Dallas. Let's pass that and vote to get rid of it in Orlando and let it die. Or let's vote to start the process in Dallas to send a signal that we trust the trustees cannot miss. And I'll tell you what, if we pass that vote in Dallas and the trustees do nothing, I mean, that tells us something that goes way beyond the ERLC. I mean, that tells us that essentially the trustees in the Southern Baptist Convention don't care what you think at all. They don't work for you. They work for themselves. They work for the entity. They work for the president of the entity, but they're fundamentally not trustees at that point. What they are, I don't know, but they're not trustees. If we pass that vote and they do nothing. But again, either way, whatever camp you're in, you should come to Dallas, max out your messengers, be prepared to pass this vote, and let's see what they do. Maybe they respond. And if they do, maybe it can be restructured, maybe it can be reformed, maybe it can be saved. If you don't think that it's gone far enough by the time we get to Orlando, well, we can take another vote then and see. But as it stands today, and I've thought through this quite a bit, I don't know how else we get them to wake up. They need a serious shock to their system. You would have thought the vote last year would have been enough. It clearly wasn't. You would have thought going through firing Brent and rehiring him would have been enough. It clearly wasn't. And so that's the situation that we're in with them. As I do more of these, I'm going to have to figure out, my mouth gets very dry when I talk a lot. But so that's the situation at hand with the ERLC. Read Megan's article, read Christ Overall's work. They've done such good work. Shout out to David Schrock. I said this last night. I'll say it again here. If you're looking for a place to support and donate to, give to Christ Overall. They're doing fantastic work. I mean, this is just their focus for March. They do a lot of in-depth, really theologically oriented topics, different themes each month. They're doing great work. I couldn't commend them enough. I'm thankful for Schrock as a brother in Christ, as an ally in this fight. And so read Megan's article, share it widely. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that needs to be known. And be prepared to come to Dallas. You'll hear me say this probably every day between now and the end of May. You need to make a plan to come. You need to know how many messengers you can send. You need to try to fill your quota. And you need to be there, as they say, in the room where it happens. All right. So, I spent so much time on Rhett's article and Megan's article. I'm going to save this article. I'll show it to you, but I do want to talk about it. So I'll come back to it next week. As I plan to do more of these on a weekly, or even maybe multiple times in a week, 2 times in a week, rhythm going forward. But let me just kind of show you this article here real quick, because it really is a great article from Andrew Walker. It's worth attention. All grace, no nature. Evangelicalism is not ready for the culture's rightward shift. And this one really spoke to me, because I think this has been in many ways my experience. I think I've been on the leading edge of the so-called rightward shift for many years, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when peak wokeness was starting to hit. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is wrong. This is not what I was taught as a Christian, as a conservative Christian, as a Baptist. Nothing we're doing here comports with Scripture. comports with showing no partiality. If you are a pastor at a Southern Baptist church and you cannot publicly say that Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, is a bad book, which is something I saw. I mean, like you are not in the right place. So, whether it was on, Black Lives Matter and race stuff, on Donald Trump, on COVID and how we manage that, on Biden and what's going on in DEI, I feel like I've been on the leading edge of this rightward shift. And I've certainly taken a lot of slings and arrows for speaking up about it. And I'm thankful to see somebody like Dr. Walker, who I know and who is a friend, like speaking to these issues. I think it's really important, particularly to young men. And so he's saying that, as this shift is happening, evangelicalism really isn't positioned to deal with it. He says right here, and I'll point this out and then we'll move on from this one. He says, evangelicalism isn't ready to lead in this moment because generations of evangelical leaders have not spoken affirmatively of the creaturely instincts that progressives have been attacking for decades. What are those creaturely instincts? Well, I'll rattle off a few. One would be the fact that it's good to be a man, that there's a difference between men and women, that we aren't just sort of interchangeable, blobs of DNA to be shaped, into whatever mold we could be, and men can do whatever women can do, and women can do whatever men can do, and women can serve in combat roles in the ministry, and men can be, stay-at-home dads while the mom goes out to work. We're all just totally egalitarian, interchangeable parts. That's one of them. The creaturely instincts of young men to want to get married, have a family, have a country. That's a huge one. I mean, it's a good thing to love your country, to love it rightly, to have that love be ordered under Christ and properly sort of set in a total Christian ethical system. But, young men have essentially been told in America for the last, I don't know how many years, that like, if you love America and want to see it stay America and not just become essentially a boarding house for the rest of the world, like somehow you're a racist or you're xenophobic, or, you don't want to see the Great Commission fulfilled sort of in reverse, the reverse Great Commission, not you going to the nations, but the nations coming here, something that's been actively celebrated by leading evangelical figures like Blake Duncan and David Platt. And that would be another creaturely instinct. Today, RFK Jr. was sort of publicly, like, essentially fat shaming the governor of West Virginia. I mean, and it was pretty funny to see that kind of come back. I think that's actually not a bad thing at all. Like, I've had brothers tell me when I needed to lose weight over the last couple of years, there have been times where I needed to lose weight. I probably need to lose some weight now. But like, that's a creaturely instinct too, for men, the desire to be strong. That's how God made us. We should be strong. We should be fit. We should be able to fulfill martial duties. I mean, those are just a couple, having kids, like another creaturely instinct that's put into us by God is the desire to fulfill the dominion mandate. But if you were to take a survey of what something like the Gospel Coalition had to say about getting married and having kids for the last decade, you're going to find a lot more, don't make an idol out of marriage. Don't make an idol out of kids. You know what? Singleness is great. Not having kids is great. Use it to serve the Lord a lot more than encouraging people to fulfill those creaturely instincts. Those are the things that have been attacked by progressives. And he says, sure, figures within the religious right correctly protested the demise of the family and traditional morality, but other strands of evangelicalism have spoken of the Christian life as a pious evacuation from political responsibility. I mean, that's another big one too. Like, the creaturely instinct to, seek to organize ourselves in a political fashion to secure good ends for our lives together as people joining together in the United States of America under the Constitution, in this land, in our home. We've been told that that's essentially a fundamentally dirty thing. I think it was Joe Rigney who I've heard say something along the lines of, there was a young man in a church and he went up to the pastor and he said, "Pastor, I think I want to be a doctor." No pastor would say, "Well, brother, I just don't know if that's something a Christian can do without compromising. Be careful. You might make an idol out of medicine." But if a young brother in a congregation came up and said to a pastor, "Pastor, I want to go organize and win Pennsylvania for Donald Trump or for JD Vance. I want to be in the thick of political action to help elect the candidate that I think is going to help best lead this country. I guarantee you a lot of pastors would say, well, brother, I'm just not so sure Christians can be involved in politics like that. It's really, you can't do that without compromising. Like, why do we treat politics so differently than we treat medicine or law or philosophy or things like that? It's silly. But that's, again, what Dr. Walker's talking about here. Anyway, I'll move on from this, but we'll come back to it. You should also read this article from Dr. Walker, All Grace, No Nature. Evangelicalism is not ready for the culture's rightward shift. It's a great piece. I highly recommend it. And so with our closing time today, we're going to have like a little bit of fun. Well, one good thing and then sort of one funny thing to wrap up this time. So that was two big buckets on life in the Southern Baptist Convention, a quick look at Walker's article. But then I want to share this clip of Donald Trump this week, because again, what we do at Center for Baptist Leadership is we try to help sort of be a better Baptist voice in the public square, and kind of point out, praiseworthy things. And I think this was incredibly noteworthy, something that Donald Trump said this week here. And so let's take a look at this, and we'll look at it, and then we'll kind of look at one more thing and wrap up. So this is Center for Baptist Leadership, Twitter, X. We shared this video that was shared from Trump talking at a women's celebration. And I don't know if it was International Women's Day or Women's Month or whatever it was. And hopefully you'll be able to hear this when I play it. And just want you to hear what the president had to say.
No matter how many surgeries you have or chemicals you inject, if you're born with male DNA in every cell of your body, you can never become a woman. You're not going to be a woman. And that's why last month I proudly signed a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. And it was very popular and very good.
Okay. We have the President of the United States saying something that for, I don't know, close to 6,000 years of world history, if you're a young earth creationist like me, wherever you want to benchmark it, no matter how many surgeries you have or chemicals you inject, if you're born with male DNA in every cell of your body, you can never become a woman. You can't be a woman. Trump is saying something that on his face is just so matter of fact, it should not be noteworthy, but it is incredibly noteworthy. And for Southern Baptists to see this week, because our culture has gone insane on issues of basic biology. And we are pretending, so many people are pretending that men can be women and that women can be men and that men can have kids and that people can change their sex and change their genders. None of those things are possible. All of those things are fictions. All of those are an effort to shake your fist at God's good creation order. It's ultimately an act of essentially self-annihilation. It's sold as self-fulfillment, but it's self-annihilation. When a man tries to become a woman, he tries to essentially annihilate the person that he was made to be, this embodied soul by God. In Jay Budiashevsky's book on the meaning of sex, it's a great little book, and he's a Catholic natural law philosopher and lawyer. He was talking about what does true liberty mean? And, what is true freedom? And he says, true liberty and true freedom, cannot mean the ability to, seek to cease to be what we are fundamentally. He says, if he uses this analogy of colors, he's like, if you're the color blue, liberty doesn't mean trying to become the color red. I mean, that is not liberty. That is an act of self-annihilation. That's where I've picked this language up from. And that's what's happening with the transgender movement. It's fundamentally a rejection of God's good creation order, male and female, he made them. And it's an attempt to annihilate who you are most fundamentally in a misguided and ultimately futile path to self-fulfillment. And it will never be fulfilling. I mean, people know that, transgender suicide rates are higher than essentially any other demographic. And that's pre or post, quote unquote, gender affirming care and surgery. It doesn't help. It leaves them worse off. Of course, it mutilates their bodies. It scars them, chemically castrates them. And then if you sort of come out of that, a lot of that is irreversible. Obviously, this is what Abigail Schreier wrote about in her book, Irreversible Damage. You can't undo it. Anyway, this is what's gripped our culture by storm. And quite frankly, many pastors, even in the Southern Baptist Convention, have not been as strong on this as they should be. I don't have it up here, but Steve Deace, I like him a lot. He's a conservative commentator. He said, he shared this video and he said, why is it noteworthy? Like, why is it noteworthy that Trump is talking like this, and what an indictment that is on our culture and even on our church? And it really is, because there have been a lot of pastors who haven't spoken this clearly. Let me just play it again here real quick.
No matter how many surgeries you have or chemicals you inject, if you're born with male DNA in every cell of your body, you can never become a woman. You're not going to be a woman.
You're not going to be a woman. I mean, there it is. Trans women are men. Trans men are women, and that's the freedom, that's the clarity we need to bring, and we need to have the freedom to bring that clarity to this conversation. We said at Center for Baptist Leadership that Southern Baptists are thankful to see the president defending God's creation order of male and female. This is a wonderful thing. He signed multiple executive orders to defend this truth, the nature of the binary biological reality of sex. And even in the first executive order that he had on it, from conception, binary biological sex from conception, or as he said here, male DNA in every cell of your body. This is excellent language to see from a president. It's a wonderful reprieve and change from what we suffered under Biden for the last 4 years. And as we're coming up on Easter, we can remember that, Biden did this transgender day of visibility on Easter last year, just a complete thumb in the eye of Christians here in this country. So, praise God for this. Fundamentally, praise God for this. Donald Trump is going after the transgender movement. I pray that this encourages pastors and other Christian leaders to do the same. I mean, we just need to speak this boldly, speak this clearly. And I don't have time to get into it, but today it was revealed that at Andy Stanley's church, at I think it's North Point, whatever the name of the church, Andy Stanley's church, they are encouraging, I think it's parents and youth group leaders to be trans affirming for the kids at the church. So you have, on one hand, you have Donald Trump, who so many Christians, say so many things about. Donald Trump is not a pastor. He's not a Christian ethicist. He's not a biologist. And he can say it this clearly. And then you have Andy Stanley, son of Charles Stanley, leading luminary of the Southern Baptist Convention and champion of the conservative resurgence. And his son at his megachurch is having his staff essentially tell youth group leaders and parents to be trans affirming of any child who shows up in their youth group. You can check out Protestia's website on that. They shared it on X today. Lots of other people have chimed in on it too. I trust and hope that we will write on it at the Center for Baptist Leadership. And I mean, that's just insane. I mean, that is unbiblical. It's demonic. It is going to seriously hurt those kids. I mean, the church should be the place where the light overcomes the darkness, that the light shines in the darkness and the darkness does not overcome it. The church should be the place where we speak biblical truth in love to kids who are confused or hurting or misled about what it means to be a boy, what it means to be a girl. The church should be the place where a trans kid, there's no such thing as trans kids, but just to use that language, church should be a place where if there's a boy who's identifying as a girl comes and the people there love him, they care for him, they treat him with respect and dignity, but they don't indulge in the delusion, they don't indulge the lies, and they tell him the gospel truth of God's good creation order. God made you to be a boy. God made you to be a girl. You will find the most fulfillment and satisfaction and hope and joy in life by living in accordance with God's good creation order and his plan for your life, which includes, Lord willing, repenting of your sins and believing in the gospel of Jesus Christ for salvation. But also, if you're a boy, God's plan for your life is to be a boy and then to be a man. If you're a girl, God's plan for your life is to be a girl and then to be a woman, to be a potential father, to be a potential mother, to be a potential husband, to be a potential wife. There is all these potentialities that are linked to our ontological nature as men and women. And that is part of God's plan for life. All those potentialities might not be fulfilled. Not every boy who becomes a man also does become a husband and a father, but that's the way you want to order your life according to God's good creation order. And there's nowhere else they should be hearing that. I mean, there's other places they should be hearing it, but the best place to be hearing that is from a church. You go to Andy Stanley's church, they're going to affirm you in that delusion, in that lie, in that dark and twisted and disastrous path that might lead those young children to doing things like taking, cross-sex hormone treatments that will stunt their puberty, that will mess up their endocrine and hormone systems, that might permanently damage their bodies. It might lead them even further down the path to seek sort of so-called, gender affirming surgeries, which again is nothing more than state-sanctioned child physical mutilation. And that's going to lead them away from the truth of the gospel and the light of, creation in their lives. So heartbreaking to see that. And it's just, we live in a strange time, right? We live in a very strange time when Donald Trump is speaking with more clarity about the nature of men and women and boys and girls, according to God's creation order, than somebody like Andy Stanley's church. So we'll just throw that in there. And we've been going for an hour and a half here. I think we've got time for the last thing. So let me see if I can pull this up here. If you'll just bear with me for a second, I'll pull up a couple things, because what I want to look at is the White House's deportation meme on X. Okay, there, I've got that. And then I want to pull up another verse here. All right, we've got the verse, we've got the meme. Here we go. This will be sort of our last topic of conversation for the day here. And then I'm going to go join my family for a wonderful Friday evening, and hopefully you'll get on with yours, or I'm sure you'll be listening to this later. But all right, here it is. Here is the White House deportation meme in Studio Ghibli style. I think that's the term. And so as these sort of memes were kind of going out over the internet yesterday, the White House, quote tweeted one of its previous tweets about this lady, Virginia Basara Gonzalez, a previously deported alien felon convicted of fentanyl trafficking, was arrested by ICE in Philadelphia after illegally re-entering the U.S. She wept when taken into custody, picture attached. So this is a illegal alien, a felon, multiple illegal entries into the United States of America, and a fentanyl trafficker. If you don't know how serious fentanyl is, it is one of the most, if not the most deadliest drugs out there right now. In even just the smallest of doses, it can be incredibly lethal. And it comes in fundamentally through Mexico, smuggled into our country by these incredibly violent cartels. The Mexican cartels are some of the most horrifically violent criminal organizations in the world. There's a lot of rumors and I think documented facts of sort of occultic practices. They're demonic, they're satanic, they're evil. They help bring fentanyl into the United States of America. It's a crisis. It's killing our people, or sometimes, as Donald Trump has put it, it's poisoning our citizens. It certainly is. It's robbing parents of their children, robbing children of their parents. It's doing real harm and damage to our nation. And Donald Trump wants to stop the flow of fentanyl. That's a good thing. Romans 13 tells the government to do justice, to punish evildoers, to protect the citizens, and to ultimately judge good and evil according to God's laws and standards. That's all sort of assumed there and explicitly there in Romans 13, 1-7. So when Donald Trump is trying to close the borders, trying to protect our citizens from drug traffickers, from the flow of fentanyl, that is ruling righteously and justly. When Donald Trump is deporting illegal aliens, he is doing justice for American citizens. When Donald Trump's ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, rolls up Virginia Basara Gonzalez and arrests her and takes her, and deports her, that's a good thing. That is a godly thing. That is the right thing for Donald Trump to be doing. And I think actually taking the pictures of the people that they're capturing is good too, because it's a deterrent. And quite frankly, this is one sort of big emotional test for us as Christians in this country. How do we respond to these mass deportations? And how do we respond to the way that the White House is essentially sort of parading these deportations, whether it's with the criminals that were sent to, I think it was El Salvador, to the maximum security prison there, things like that. Are we pitying these people? Like when we see this picture, do you feel sympathy or empathy elicited, within yourself for the illegal alien fentanyl trafficker? Or do you stop and think about who's really being harmed here? Who's really the victim? This lady is not the victim here. The people who have bought the drugs from her, the lives that she's ruined by being a fentanyl trafficker, of course, they have personal culpability for the part in that, but they're the victims, or the people who accidentally ingested it in some way, shape, or form. And so, like, just in general, like, we should rejoice when, I think fundamentally as Christians, we should rejoice when we see a post like this on March 18. So then what do we think about the meme, right? That kind of looks like Tom Homan in the meme there. A lot of people have reacted to this. And so I'm going to close with this. And I would say as Christians, this is a really good test, again, to think through, are consciences calibrated according to God's standards, or are they calibrated according to worldly standards of what's essentially toxic empathy and sort of misplaced sympathy for people that we should not be feeling sympathy for? And so, you could say, well, there's no need to mock this lady or dehumanize her. I don't really know if that's what it's doing. I certainly don't think it's dehumanizing her. I would say most fundamentally, she's dehumanized herself by, participating in fentanyl trafficking. She's dehumanized herself by breaking our laws multiple times and coming here again and again illegally. And so, I think posting a picture like this, I mean, quite frankly, I think most Americans would see this and say, it's good that the White House is taking this problem seriously. And it's actually good to see the White House sort of poking fun at the evil that has been meted out upon this country through mass migration, through drug trafficking, through cartel, violence and incursion into our country, as they seek to protect us and do good. So that would sort of be my take on it. And, I'll share, a quote and then a verse. The quote, I'm not entirely sure who it can be attributed to. Some people say it can be attributed to Adam Smith, but, the quote is essentially, that mercy to the wicked is punishment for the innocent, or something like that. I kind of mangled it, but it's like, mercy to the innocent is cruelty. I've mangled that for a second time. All right. Third time's a charm here. Mercy to the wicked is cruelty to the innocent. Mercy to the wicked is cruelty to the innocent. And that is fundamentally a biblical standard here as well. So let me share this verse with you, and then we'll kind of get to an end here. And the verse is Deuteronomy 19, 20, and 21, which says that, and the rest shall hear and fear, and never again commit any such evil among you. Your eye shall not pity. It shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand. And this verse is particularly in regards to, it's a law given in Deuteronomy for how the people of Israel need to be comporting themselves. And it's a law concerning witnesses. And that when you find that a false witness has accused his brother falsely, it says, then you shall do to him as he had meant to do to his brother. So shall you purge the evil from your midst, and the rest shall hear and fear, and shall never again commit any such evil among you. Your eye shall not pity. It shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Look, that's, of course, not the law that we operate under today. America is not Israel, certainly not Old Covenant Israel. No other nation in this world right now is, Old Covenant Israel. And that's not the, law of the land for America. But we know that this is God's law. It's perfect. It helps calibrate our consciences. It helps us understand what is right and what is wrong according to, again, God's perfectly inerrant and inspired word. And the point here is that when we're purging evil from within our midst, and if you do it in such a way, in a very serious way, it shall strike fear into the hearts of other people, and they won't do the same thing. And particularly the instruction here is that if you find that it's one of your own family members who's committed this evil, who's disobeyed God, that you cannot pity and excuse them. Your eye shall not pity. And that certainly applies too, because the natural inclination there would be, if it's one of your family members that's been caught, that you would want to sort of let them off the hook. And so God's giving this command here, saying you shall not pity. But I mean, it certainly also applies to people who aren't your family members. I mean, how much more should we not pity the people who have broken our laws and have come into this country illegally, who have brought drugs here, who are harming American citizens? The role of the U.S. government under God is to protect American citizens first and foremost. Donald Trump will ultimately answer to the Lord for how he fulfills his duties and obligations, not as the president of the world, not as the president of illegal alien fentanyl drug traffickers, not as the president of Mexico, which he's not, or of Canada, which he's not, but not as the president of all the illegal aliens who are living here in our country, because they're not our citizens and he's not their president. Donald Trump is responsible to God to execute his mission in that office under the authority of God to defend the rights and interests and well-being of American citizens. I think by and large, he's doing that with his immigration agenda. And I really want to touch on this because this is something that Southern Baptists, I think, have really kind of struggled to think through clearly and well for many years on the immigration issue, not least of which because the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission has essentially adopted a pro-amnesty, pretty much open borders posture that focuses more empathetic concern on illegal aliens than it does on American citizens. Donald Trump is flipped that on its head. He cares about American citizens, their well-being, their safety, a lot more than illegal aliens, and certainly a lot more than illegal alien felonious fentanyl traffickers. And so if the White House wants to meme that out, look, I'd be open to hearing somebody say, I don't like that. I don't think it's in good taste. But I really want you to think about this as like a gut check. When you see that meme, who does your heart go out to? Does your heart go out to the felon, fentanyl, illegal alien trafficker, drug trafficker, or does it go out to the American citizens that are your neighbors that have been hurt by the cartels, by the flow of drugs, by the loss of jobs to illegal aliens? So, we'll end on that note here in terms of sort of cultural conversations. So thank you for sticking around and, bearing with me as we talk through some major issues in the SBC with Rhett Burns' article on the need for more financial transparency and on how the current business and financial plan rewrite falls very short. On Megan Basham's article on the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission and Chrysler Ball's theme on it, and then looking briefly at Andrew Walker's piece, and then also on Donald Trump's defense of the binary nature of biological sex being male and female, straight out of, Genesis 1:27. God made them male and female in his image. He made them male and female. And then a good conversation on the nature of misplaced empathy and how we should not pity when those who are and have done evil in our country are being removed. And we should get more comfortable with our government making it clear and sending a message to lawbreakers and drug traffickers that they won't be welcome here. And if they're caught here, they might be mocked a little bit on their way back out of the country to serve as a deterrent. Lots of other things we could cover. Thank you for joining us today for this weekly wrap up. I'm going to try to get this going on a weekly basis. Hopefully we can get our studio better set up here so I'm not sort of operating the way that I am here currently, maybe get some better tech, better lighting, better sound. But I hope this is helpful. Really, I take this time because I want to serve Southern Baptists. I mean it when I say I want to help us think about political issues more biblically. I want it to help us think about issues that matter to our country, and to think very clearly and hard about these major issues that are facing the Southern Baptist Convention. That's what we're trying to do with Center for Baptist Leadership. If you're interested in supporting our efforts, please consider donating. You can find us online at centerforbaptistleadership.org. Follow us on Baptist Leaders. Subscribe to our YouTube account. We've got great engagement on X. So thank you for your engagement there. Would really like to help kind of grow our YouTube presence. So if you can subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and share it with others and recommend it, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I know some of you have reached out to me with some questions. I need to get back to people. So bear with me on that as I try to sort through things. It's been a busy couple of weeks here. And with that, brothers and sisters, I pray that God blesses you. I pray that he gives us wisdom as we prepare to head to Dallas. And I hope that you have a good weekend. Take care.